Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. In today's video, we have a wonderfully unique presentation by astronomer and astrologer Brandon Hanson titled The Great North American Eclipse. And lastly, if you wish to view our current class, workshop and webinar offerings, please visit KeplerCollege.org. And without further ado, let's get into the video.
I would like to introduce Brandon Hanson, who's going to talk about the Great American Solar Eclipse that's coming up on Monday. Brandon has his natal sun, moon, and south node together in Taurus. Brandon is an eclipse baby. He is an astronomer as well as an astrologer. He's the inventor of a patent-pending collection of celestial displays called the ACHOO. And correct me on how to say that, Brandon, whenever you take over. He's going to be using this annually as a visual aid during the webinar. So when Brandon's eyes aren't up in the sky, he's often is himself as an award-winning aerial acrobat. So interesting. He specializes in silk straps and hammock. He currently coaches for the world-renowned professional youth circus group, Les Petits Cirque in Los Angeles, California, and he is an active member of the Kepler Astrologers Toastmaster Club. You can find out more about Brandon at his website, annularastro.space. I'm going to hand it over to you, Brandon, and please do correct me if I said any of those things wrong. Welcome, Brandon.
In 2 days' time, I see you shine in joy and lion's pelt. You're welcomed in your teacher's den and ask him for his help. He sits you down upon a throne and treats you like a king. Good friends delight both left and right, with whom you eat and sing. He gives advice, it is precise, you'll know just what to do. But then I think you take a drink of wine not meant for you. Won't be long then, half horse, half men descend on you in rage. Your sin they tell from pungent smell, 4 centuries in age. Their wrathful brawl you can't forestall, and fear then for your life. A dozen poison arrows kill, but one gives living strife. Regret will bore down to your core, but trust in fate's great wheel. For through his woe, Chiron will show the whole world how to heal. My name is Heracles, and I am in the midst of performing 10 great labors for my cousin Eurystheus, the king of Mycenae. I have been sentenced to these labors for the murder of my wife and children. I swear to you, here in view of Mount Olympus and my father's throne, Zeus, that I never meant to hurt them. When I awoke with their blood on my hands, nothing will be more terrifying. However, there's none to blame but the one with my name, Heracles. So, in the first of my labors, I wrestled with a Nemean lion who gained a fearsome reputation for having a hide impenetrable to any weapons. Once I got my arms around and broke its neck, I used one of its own claws to cut through its hide and have donned its head ever since. In the second labor, I battled the fearsome Hydra, a dragon whose heads multiplied with each swing of my sword. Don't tell Eurystheus, because I promised not to seek aid during any of my labors, but a mutual cousin of ours helped by cauterizing each neck as I cut so that they could no longer grow. Before I was finished, I dipped the heads of my arrows into the blood of its toxic neck and have carried those arrows with me ever since. In the third labor, I chased a deer for a year. to catch this time, not to kill. After the year had passed and I finally tossed the stag over my shoulder, I was confronted by the goddess of the moon and the hunt, Artemis, who demanded to know why I stole her sacred animal from her forest. So I told her honestly of my labors, and she allowed me to leave with her stag as long as I released it afterward. In addition, so impressed was she with my ability to accomplish this task that she gave me another gift. One reading with her twins oracle at Delphi. So here I find myself at Apollo's oracle, where she has just pronounced a prophecy. I wrote it down as fast as I could after she disappeared in a puff of smoke, and I've read it for you now. She's no longer here to answer the burning questions I have. However, she left behind this mysterious board upon which she used to read my future. And luckily for me, my teacher Chiron taught me not only the art of archery, but also the science of how to read space and time with one of these, an annulus. So let's see if we can use this annulus to make sense of this prophecy. The oracle began, in 2 days' time, I see you shine in joy and lion's pelt. You're welcomed in your teacher's den and ask him for his help. Now, the thing in the sky that shines the most is the sun. And we can tell that this one is the sun because it is the largest and brightest by far. When the sun is at the very top of the annulus, it is midday or noon. And we have it set here just after noon in what is called the 9th house. In addition, I know that we have just recently passed the spring equinox, a season which we call Aries. And all of this comes together to form a very fascinating placement for the sun. It said, in 2 days' time, I see you shine in joy and lion's pelt. The Hellenists of this culture consider the 9th house to be where the sun finds joy. So that's what she must have been referring to. And the sign of Aries is said to be the sun's exaltation. So we have a doubling up of dignity for the sun. Interestingly, when the sun is both in exaltation and joy, being in 9th house of Aries, we know that the sign of Leo is rising in the east, making the sun the ruler of the ascendant. It's quite easy, and any astrologer worth their salt should be able to tell in my lion's headdress that I do, in fact, have Leo rising. So this configuration 2 days from now, from the view of Leo ascendant, has the sun in exaltation and in its joy, shining brightly in the early afternoon. She continued, you're welcomed in your teacher's den and ask him for his help. Traditionally, the 9th house is associated with your teachers. So she could see me, the sun, within my teacher's house, the 9th, which happens to be Aries, ruled by Mars. And my teacher, Chiron, is a teacher of warriors, like myself. So a very apt prophecy. The spooky part was that I did not inform her that I planned to go see Chiron as I come away from here and towards my 4th labor, capturing a boar in the mountains. So we continue. He sits you down upon a throne and treats you like a king. Good friends delight both left and right, with whom you eat and sing. With this part, again, I see her looking at the sun with such high dignity and seeing that Chiron is going to treat me well as a guest. He always does this. He is a very good host for sure. However, there is something else I find interesting here. In one of our lessons, Chiron told me that the astrologers in the East look predominantly for what they call king configurations or Raj yogas. A Raj yoga is formed in a couple of ways, but one is to have the ruler of a quadrant house, which is 1, 4, 7, and 10, within a trine house, which is 1, 5, or 9, with a node, which is what the Eastern astrologers call Rahu and Ketu. Now I see here that we have the nodes in alignment with the sun. So the first lord, the lord of a quadrant, is in a trinal house, the 9th, with a node. So we can conclude that the sun is in a Raj Yoga. So she sees me sitting in my teacher's house, treated like a king, with good friends, delighting both left and right, with whom I eat and sing. So to either side of me, the sun, we see that there is Mercury, who is closest. I remember Chiron telling me that Hermes never travels too far from his brother, Apollo, who drives the chariot of the sun. So Hermes is towards the left side of the sun, and I believe that it is retrograde because it is coming in closer to us. And to the right is the planet Venus, who also never gets too far from the sun. On either side, they delight both left and right, and we eat and sing two things that Venus and Mercury both love: music and sensual enjoyments. It's looking pretty good for me this day and 2 days. We go from here. He gives advice, Chiron. It is precise. You'll know just what to do. This is, again, very good for me. When I go to visit my teacher, Chiron, he will know how I should proceed through my next labor, which is exactly what I'm looking for. But then I think you take a drink of wine not meant for you. This is where her prophecy took a turn. As I understand it, taking a drink of wine not meant for me, I can't imagine why I would do this. I think of myself as a good guest. I cannot foresee why I would take wine that was not offered for me. We'll come back to this. Won't be long then, half horse, half men descend on you in rage. Your sin they tell from pungent smell 4 centuries in age. So once I drink the wine, half horse, half men will descend upon the house. Chiron, my teacher, is a centaur with the torso of a man and the body of a horse. So he is amongst a group of centaurs, but he's a little different from the rest because his father is the Titan god Kronos, the same father as my father, Zeus, my grandfather. So, containing the immortal blood of a Titan, Chiron is himself immortal, and he is extremely civilized, more like his man half than his horse half. Learned in all sorts of different disciplines, from archery to astrology, and we have been friends for a very long time. However, his fellow centaurs are not quite as polite, let's say. So when I take the drink of this wine, it says, 4 centuries in age, your sin they tell from pungent smell. So the wine I drink must have an odor that is quite potent. And from that, the other centaurs will realize what I've done and come to Chiron's house angry with us. Let's see if we can see that in the chart. Oh, I see. So I am in the house of my teacher, which is Aries in the 9th. The ruler of Aries is Mars. So Chiron must be represented here by the red planet. And it is in conjunction in Pisces with Saturn. So if Chiron is Mars and the rest of the centaurs are the slightly more malefic Saturn in the sign of Pisces, they are together having a disagreement over this libation, this liquid, which I have drinking. Speaking of which, I think we can see that from Jupiter being in the 2nd house for myself, being a libation in which I drink. So we are really starting to get this chart in order, I think, and impressive the way that the Oracle was able to use it to tell my future. Won't be long then, half horse, half men descend on you in rage. Your sin they tell from pungent smell 4 centuries in age. Their wrathful brawl you can't forestall, and fear then for your life. A dozen poison arrows kill, but one gives living strife. So, after I've drinking the wine, and the centaurs descend upon the house, they'll become violent. And within the commotion, I will use my poisoned arrows to keep myself safe from the rampage. And while a dozen poison arrows kill, because they are lethal, one gives living strife. So the one centaur I couldn't kill with the arrows is Chiron, because he contains the blood of a Titan. So he cannot die once he is pierced by the arrow's points. Regret will bore down to your core. I already feel that coming upon me. But trust in fate's great wheel. Oh, I see the last component we haven't talked about is the moon. Right now, the moon seems to be in alignment with Mars and Saturn. And tomorrow, it will come into conjunction with Venus. But in 2 days' time, it will align here with the sun and the North Node. I remember Chiron telling me what happens when the luminaries come together at a node. The day can turn to night, he said. What is it called? An eclipse. I've never seen one before, but the moon can cross the orb of the sun and darken it even during the day. So if I'm the sun, regret will bore down to my core. This must be the shadow of the moon crossing over me, even though I am in a state of joy and exaltation beforehand. But the oracle said to trust in fate's great wheel. For through his woe, Chiron will show the whole world how to heal. Now that I know what will happen to my teacher by me going to travel to see him, is this a fate that I can change? What if I simply don't drink the wine? Maybe if I abstain from all liquids, only drinking water, then I can prevent this woe from happening. But if I save myself and Chiron from our individual pain, I'll prevent a greater happiness. For through his woe, Chiron will show the whole world how to heal. So it must be Chiron's fate that I drink this wine and pierce him with a hydra-tipped arrow. And through his suffering, perhaps he will perform experiments and great achievements that allow other people to work through their pain. You see, I cannot save the warriors who fight next to me on the battlefield. I cannot cure the ill. While I am taking on these labors and saving people from the threats of wild beasts, I cannot cure all the ailments of humanity. But perhaps Chiron will be able to show many more people how to work through these kinds of ailments. So maybe I don't have to drink the wine, but I'll choose to drink the wine. Whew. Hello, stargazers, astrologers, and students of Kepler and elsewhere. My name is Brandon, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to present some of my thoughts about the upcoming total solar eclipse over the United States and Canada occurring on Monday. Thank you so much to Lori and to Mary for moderating my talk. It was a beautiful introduction, and it means a lot to me to be able to speak on this subject for all of you. It is a topic that is quite timely with our upcoming conjunction of the Sun, Moon, and North Node together in Aries. It is also a timeless topic because solar eclipses have been inspiring humanity for thousands of years. We have records of the Babylonians keeping track of these alignments. I think since like the 5000s BC. And I am personally is also a topic that is quite personal to me because I happen to be an eclipse baby. So this happens to be my natal chart. You can see I have a very late degree Libra ascendant. They're at 27. I'd like to point your attention to my 8th house of Taurus, where I have the Sun and Moon together with the South Node. This is the combination that you will be looking for when trying to observe the chart for eclipses. This is because the nodes, the North and South lunar nodes, represent the intersection between the Sun's ecliptic and the Moon's path through the sky, which are slightly different and, like a Venn diagram, overlap at two opposite points. So while the Moon crosses these points, crossing the ecliptic and going north at one point in her orbit, and crossing and going south in the other part of her orbit. This does not always cause eclipses. The thing that we need is for the sun to arrive at a node, and then for the moon either to come into conjunction, which is usually a new moon, or in this case would be a solar eclipse, or to become opposite. So if she's at the other node, then it would be a full moon that transforms into a lunar eclipse. So with sun, moon, and the south node together in Taurus, I was born just the afternoon before a solar eclipse took place in, it was in the 11th house the next morning. And there's one more component here that I'd like to point out, is that little symbol with kind of the crescent moon and the cross underneath it is the point called Lilith to astrologers, or to astronomers is the point called the lunar apogee. The apogee is the point in the moon's elliptical orbit where it happens to be furthest away from the Earth. This means that it appears slightly smaller in the sky when it is near Lilith, and a little bit slower. There are a few qualities that Lilith gives to the moon. But so, in the case that an eclipse, a solar eclipse, takes place very close to Lilith, the eclipse is actually called annular. That is A-N-N-U-L-A-R. So it was an annular eclipse that took place overhead. And this will lead me to the picture on the right of the screen, which is of the annulus, which is a board of my own design, which pictured in the photo also has my natal chart upon it. So it also has Jupiter rising on the left side with the north node. And then on the other side of the Earth has that moon coming into conjunction with the sun over in the 8th house with Mars sitting. So I will be using the annulus a little bit more later on, but we're going to talk about me for a little longer. The event of my birth was a harrowing experience for all involved, because during the labor, my heart rate flatlined. And as they surveyed what was wrong, it was realized that I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck 3 times and was suffocating in the womb. So my mom was rushed to an emergency C-section where I got cut out of her abdomen, with the miracle of modern medicine saving both of our lives. And of course, we both lived to tell a tale, but we stayed overnight in the hospital to recover. The next morning, as she carried little Brandon out of the hospital and into the sunlight, I sneezed twice. Now, while the trauma of the birth itself is only available to me through the retelling by people who were present and of a more matured state of mind, the experience of sun sneezing is something that I relate to more viscerally, because it continues to happen to me to this day. The tendency to sneeze when exposed to bright sunlight is known as ACHOO syndrome, which means, oh no, I forgot to write in my notes what the acronym for, but it's like autosomal compulsive helio something outburst. I can't remember exactly what the acronym is, but I think it's very funny. That's called ACHOO. And basically what happens is that the the vagus nerve that holds the function of sneezing gets misplaced onto the vagus nerve that has the reflex for pupil dilation. And so when I walk out into the sun, my pupils dilate and this misfires as a sneeze. This is actually a fairly common trait. However, for me, I discovered the rationale behind it when I did my 23andMe. So it was actually within my genetic markers that this anomaly was not revealed because it happens to me literally every day. So I knew about it, but it gave me the scientific rationale for why that happens. Ooh. However, it was the study of astrology in my own chart that made me realize that the act of walking out into the sunlight and having it become eclipsed by my eyelids, since you really can't keep your eyes open when you're sneezing, that studying my birth chart contextualized that daily event as a ritual, a kind of manifestation of this part of my birth chart that brought way more meaningfulness to me than the scientific explanation. It's cool to know that it is genetic and exactly what is kind of causing it within my physiology, but it is really the kind of metaphysical rationale that makes me value that daily experience so much more and gives me a deeper appreciation for that going on. So this is kind of how I like to approach astrology in general, is kind of these three things: having understanding of the scientific basis behind the things that we're talking about, knowing the stories that people through time have told about these subjects, and upon those two things, kind of the science and the mythology, building the meaning that comes to us through the study of astrology. So you can kind of think of it as the science and mythology laying the foundation that astrology can then build upon. So we'll continue going. This is a picture of my whole family and I staring at the sun during the previous annular solar eclipse that took place over the southwestern United States in October, which was a very beautiful day for me. Here we are underneath it. On the annulus that is next to me, we have the annular solar eclipse, where the sun is aligned with the nodes, and then the moon has come into conjunction with it, but a bit farther than her average of her orbit in that next to Lilith. So finally, we are coming back to the chart of Monday. This is for the exact moment that the occultation of the sun by the moon will occur over Niagara Falls, which is where I am. Funnily enough, at 2:22 p.m. We love that little angel number. And we can see in the chart that we have Leo rising with the sun at 19 Aries in the 9th house, with the moon, who's also at 19 Aries, just 1 minute apart. And still, even with just that 1 minute distance, Chiron happens to be right between them. This is not something that Hercules in the Oracle of Delphi would have any knowledge about, because it's just a kind of I think Chiron's actually considered a comet, kind of stable comet between Saturn and Uranus's orbits. But as modern astrologers, we can really now see why the story of Heracles and his poisoning of Chiron might be extremely relevant. On either side of the sun and moon Chiron conjunction, well, on the right side, we have the North Node. This is what contextualizes the new moon as a solar eclipse. And then on either side of them, we have Venus, who's just stepped into Aries a few days before. I think she just got into Aries today. Maybe it was yesterday. And Mercury, who is retrograde, but still just ahead of the sun. So that gives us a pretty packed ninth house, what we might call a stellium of planets. And definitely the greatest point of interest within the chart, not only because an eclipse is occurring there, but because the ruler of the ascendant is there, who is Leo. I think for a lot of the eastern United States, Leo will be rising during the eclipse, where for a lot of the western United States, where only a partial eclipse will be visible, but Cancer will be rising. So in either case, one of the two luminaries will be ruling the ascendant during the time in which the eclipse is taking place, which is pretty interesting. As I talked about within the poem, the sun is in its exaltation in Aries. It is actually at the point that we would call the degree of its exaltation. So 19 Aries is specifically the point in the sky we would call the sun's exaltation. It is in its joy in the ninth. So that is the Hellenistic kind of categorization of which house the sun likes the best. And it has a really strong trine to the ascendant. So it is sending a very receptive trine to its own house. And I mentioned just a little bit before that this would also be considered a Raj Yoga. So in Vedic astrology, a Raj Yoga can be created when the ruler of an angle, in this case the ascendant, is in a trinal house. So we have the sun in the ninth, which is a trine, and in conjunction with a node. So we can say that the sun is in a Raj Yoga as well. Another way that you create a Raj Yoga is by having the rulers of a quadrant and a triangle together. So we can also say that the sun rules a trine, the first house, and Venus rules the 10th house, a quadrant. So there's also a Raj Yoga occurring between the sun and Venus, which is quite interesting. In any case, the sun is in a very, very, very powerful position at this moment when it suddenly gets eclipsed. And I think this is such a fundamentally important thing in the chart to consider. It seems extremely basic and like is the sun being the primary point in the sky regardless of the chart in some ways. But just in this particular configuration, it is kind of at its strongest possible power. And yet, even at this point, it can become obscured, occulted, eclipsed by the moon who is there. And she is not shown, but Lilith happens to be down in Virgo, so almost on the opposite side of the chart, which is what makes the moon large enough to cover the sun totally. And actually for a very long amount of time. In some parts in the line of totality, it will be covered for 4.5 minutes, which is quite long. The total solar eclipse that occurred in the United States in 2017 was only for about 2.5 minutes. So the moon is quite close, very large, and will cover the sun for quite a long time. We'll look at these other two houses just ahead of the sun. Moon stellium in Aries is the widely anticipated conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus. A very fascinating aspect all on its own that I'm sure people have been doing webinars on. That could be its whole own hour-and-a-half lecture. And then just behind them is the conjunction of the malefics, Mars and Saturn in Pisces. And together they take up a space of just more than a sextile, less than 10 degrees more than a sextile. So this chart creates a very, very tight bundle that is very interestingly all very high in the sky when the eclipse is taking place. So let's move back to the annulus to see if we can get this view a little better. So we have the sun, again, in the 9th, conjunct the moon in the north node. On either side is Mercury and Venus, who are all together there in Aries. Here at the back, I have a little crystal for Chiron, the asteroid between Uranus and Saturn. To the left, just ahead in Taurus, is the conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus. And just behind is the conjunction of Mars and Saturn. So hopefully you're really able to see now how the annulus is taking the chart and showing it to us in this kind of three-dimensional capacity. And just so striking how everything, if we take off the south node, how everything is concentrated so drastically in that one section with just the sextile between Mars and Uranus. So I'm going to take these off because the most fascinating thing about a total solar eclipse is how the day can be transformed into night. So in the event that the sun gets covered, suddenly all of the stars that are around it can emerge. And on the side of the annulus, we'll be able to see that with a little bit of context. So here we have the constellation of Pisces, which is the two blue fish here. This is where the solar eclipse will take place. That might seem kind of confusing because we have been talking about how the eclipse will take place in Aries. But this is just a matter of precession. When we say that the sun is in tropical Aries, we're saying that it is the beginning of the spring after the equinox. But in sidereal, in the constellation, the luminaries will be together in Pisces. So it is here. Directly up would be noon, but we're just a little bit after noon. Yeah. So all during the day, just like regular, the sky will be blue, but then suddenly, right around 2:22 p.m. here, the sun will begin to darken until, if you're on the line of totality, it will become completely black. This is supposed to be an extremely amazing solar eclipse because, sorry, I couldn't find my camera, because the sun happens to be at a solar maximum period, which means that in its like 11 or 12-year cycle, it is at its peak in terms of energy output. So they are predicting that the corona that is revealed, which is the atmosphere of the sun that appears very spiked all the way around the black disk of the eclipse, will be quite broad with its tendrils really extending out far. So the corona will be revealed, and then a couple of planets will come out. So it is probably the case that the easiest planets to see will be Venus, who right now is quite close to the sun. She's just 15 degrees behind, which puts her in range of the rays. And Jupiter, who's just ahead by 30 degrees in Taurus. So on either side of the sun will emerge the two benefics, the brightest planets in the sky. This is very, very exciting because this will be the only time during the vast majority of 2024 when the benefics will be seen together. So back in December of last year, they came out of the sky with Venus being a morning star and Jupiter becoming an evening star. Since then, they have been coming closer and closer and closer. They've been coming closer and closer with the sun between them. So we've not been able to see them at the same time. And after this, they will come into conjunction with the sun around the same time in May and proceed to move to opposite sides of the sun. So over the remainder of the year, they will just switch places and times of day in which you see them. So these 4 minutes of totality will be basically the only time when you can see both benefics at the same time for 2024, which is the point that I'm most excited for. However, there's even more fun to be had. On Venus's side, here next to the bucket of Aquarius will be that conjunction of Saturn and Mars. So while Saturn and Mars are a little bit more dim than the benefics, having them very close together might make it easier to pick them both out in the sky. They will also be the furthest down towards the western horizon at that point. So a little bit trickier to view than Venus and Jupiter, but still very fascinating to have them there. Mercury probably will not be visible at all. It is too close to the sun to be seen at all during the day. And even though the sun's light will disappear, Mercury's basically whole lit side is basically facing away from us right now. So it will probably not be visible. However, while that completes all the visible planets, with us having Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn now out in the sky, these are the only ones we can regularly see. There is one more thing that might possibly become visible in this moment, and that is not Chiron. Chiron is way, way, way too far and small and exactly behind the sun. But instead, a comet called, I have a slide with its name. A comet is currently visible in the evening sky that has just passed by the star called Hamal, which is the brightest star in the constellation of Aries. Here. Oh, gorgeous. It is actually making its way towards the sun right now, coming this way, and fairly close to Jupiter. So hopefully we'll be able to use Jupiter to find the comet during this moment. Yes, Rachel has found it in the chat, the Pons Brooks comet. Some are calling it the Devil's Comet because it has a very beautiful way that the tails have kind of been like spurting. The tail is very kind of rapidly changing day to day, and sometimes looks like it has devil horns. And with the eclipse coming up, I know that people are eager to compound the omens. So it makes sense to give it such a name as that, a nickname. So very beautiful. This is a very fascinating sky that will emerge in the moment that that eclipse takes place. All of the traditional visible planets and even the invisible planets with Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto all out in that moment that the eclipse takes place. Quite incredible. I'm very much hoping for clear skies to be able to witness all of this. Oh, and before we go back to the PowerPoint, I want to let you know about one more fascinating occultation that's about to take place. So another word for eclipse is occultation, which might sound familiar as people who are interested in occult studies, which is something that has been covered up or something more in the shadows. So we can call the way that the moon covers up other points of light in the sky occultations. And eclipses are just one of those kinds of occultations. So an occultation that a lot of people aren't talking about is the occultation of Venus that will take place tomorrow morning. So on April 7th, right around dawn, the moon, the waning crescent moon, will be coming into conjunction. Will be coming into conjunction with the planet Venus. And from here in Canada, the sun will actually rise, but you'll still be able to see them. And then the moon will come in front of Venus, blocking out her light for just a few minutes before she gets revealed on the other side. So, as another fascinating, do that. Another fascinating piece of this chart, both astronomically and astrologically. Sorry, I'm getting kind of flustered. We'll go back to my screen, and actually I'm going to share the PowerPoint. But this is another component of the eclipse that I have been extremely excited for. And here in Niagara Falls, we actually have a lot better weather tomorrow, in the forecast tomorrow than on Monday. So the occultation of Venus is might actually be the one that I get to see. So we're going to share the screen again, go back to Safari. We're back and we're screen sharing. So this is the eclipse chart. Here is the kind of the sidereal view of the moment of the eclipse. You can see that the sun and moon are conjunct upon the western fish of Pisces. So again, that is the difference between sidereal and tropical, that it will be in the tropical sign of Aries, but the sidereal constellation of Pisces. Just ahead of it will be Mercury, quite dim, very small. You can really see the difference between Mercury and then the two next planets on either side, Venus, who's the brightest of all the planets, and Jupiter, who is second brightest. So they will definitely be the more easily visible things in that moment. However, a little bit further to the east or to the west from Venus will be Saturn and Mars, who again, since they are so close to each other, hopefully will make each of them easier to find since they're a pair. And quite lovely. Here we have a representation of the comet, Pons-Brooks. It actually has a 71-year orbit, which I find very fascinating because the cycles of the eclipse, which we will get to, called Soros cycles, have an 18-year period. So 72 is a multiple of 4. So the last time it appeared was very close to the 4th previous member of the same eclipse family. You can see right here how it has just passed over Hamal in Aries. So it is heading over towards the sun, which is in Pisces. And on the left, you can look at its amazing kind of variety of tails that it's been photographed with, because it is very rambunctious, it appears. So going back, you can now think of, you can now think of the comet as being over here above the constellation of Aries, with Jupiter kind of being the thing that might lead you through Hamal to see it right here. And this is the map for the lunar occultation of Venus. So this line stretching from here down in Texas through Oklahoma, Missouri, Illinois, Wisconsin, and up into Canada is actually very, very similar to the path of totality that the eclipse will be taking, which is just slightly to the west of where this line is. So almost everyone who is traveling this weekend to see the total solar eclipse, or who happens to live under it, because many millions of people just happen to live on that line, that whole entire area, as well as more, will have the opportunity to go out and see this lunar occultation of Venus tomorrow morning. So you'll want to come out just a little bit before sunrise, so within dawn. It will still be tricky to see because Venus has entered the rays of the sun, and the moon will be a very, very tiny crescent. But hopefully their proximity to each other will help guide you to them. And you can use like stargazing apps as well. My favorite happens to be Sky Safari, is the one that I use. But once you find them, you want to use binoculars to keep track of them into the morning. So even as the sun rises and the sky becomes blue, these are 2 of the only objects in the whole sky which you can see during the day, besides the sun, of course. So you'll be able to use binoculars to follow the moon and Venus up into the sky, and then watch as Venus disappears behind the tiny crescent of the moon. So that is, of course, beautiful astronomy. The astrology of such an event is perhaps something that we can dive into a little bit at the end. Oop, I'm actually coming up right on the end. Perfect. So let's very quickly talk about 2 myths related to the events of eclipses, and then we'll finish with talking about Saros series or the families. So the first myth that I'd like to talk about is one kind of related to the story I shared at the beginning with Heracles, and that is the myth of Apollo. Now, he and his twin sister Artemis were the children of Zeus and the goddess Leto. And when it was found out that Leto was pregnant with Zeus's children, scandal, Hera got very angry and proclaimed that she would not, proclaimed or got the goddess of childbirth itself to not allow Leto to give birth on any stable piece of land. And in addition to that, sent a monster called Python, it's kind of a snake entity, to pursue her. So this was going on, and Zeus like felt really bad because he's like, oh, like I like put this woman in danger, you know, and she's carrying my children. So he helped arrange for her to find this floating island. So that helped to fulfill the one part of kind of the curse that she was no longer on stable ground. She was on kind of this moving ground within the water. So then she finally is able to go into labor and ends up giving birth to Artemis first, and then Artemis helps with the labor of her twin brother, Apollo. After this happens, they're both gifted with bows and arrows, and then Apollo becomes determined to get vengeance on this python that was chasing his pregnant mother. So he ends up going and finding the cave where Python dwelt and slaying the beast. From that interaction, he gained Python's ability to see into the future and established his first temple, including his oracle in that place, which was later to be known as Delphi. So in this story, we get a solar deity battling against a kind of serpentine being, and in overcoming them, gaining a kind of gift of foresight and the ability to see through time, which is kind of a very consistent set of symbols that you can find in a lot of myths having to do with eclipses. You will often find a solar deity battling a serpentine monster, and in the overcoming of such, like gaining extra wisdom or powers. So we'll just touch on one more, which is the kind of explanation for eclipses from Vedic culture. So it starts with the very epic and beautiful story of the churning of the milk ocean, the Sumatra Marathon, which is too detailed to go into at length. But just to briefly summarize, the Devas, who are pictured there on the left, are usually the rulers of heaven or Swarga, and they get kicked out by the Asuras, who are more kind of monstrous entities, and want to get back. So they pray to the divine god Vishnu, who's sitting up at the top of this mountain, and ask for his help. So he instructs the Devas to make a pact with the Asuras to churn this ocean, because at the bottom they'll find Amrita, or the kind of the ambrosia or elixir of immortality. So they make this deal. They come together to string Shiva's cobra around the mountain and like churn the mountain inside of it. Again, there's like lots of details in here, and lots of things end up coming out, including like a poison that threatens to destroy the universe, who Shiva ingests. Lots of other beautiful animals, and the goddess Lakshmi appears. And finally, the Amrita does emerge. So what they've been working for comes out, and immediately the Asuras steal it and start to run away. So the Devas called Vishnu again. They're like, hey, like this is kind of your plan. We followed along. And now the Asuras have the elixir. What are we supposed to do? And he says, don't worry, I'll take care of it. So Vishnu incarnates as a goddess named Mohini, and is so enchanting as she comes upon the Asuras that they just give her the elixir. They're like, oh, you are so pure and so beautiful and attractive. Like, we know you'll be fair and just and good, so please be the one to distribute this Amrita to us. So she's like, yes, that's fine. And she takes her time so that all the devas can also arrive, and she sits them all in a line. However, one of the Asuras is not so captivated by her beauty and keeps a little bit more of his wits about him, and can see that Mohini is only distributing the Amrita to all the devas, not the Asuras. So he goes and disguises himself as a deva and seats himself between the sun and the moon. When the Amrita gets passed to him, his name is Svarbanu. When the Amrita is passed to Svarbanu, he immediately drinks it, where all of the other devas are waiting patiently to all be served so that they can drink it together. But Svarbanu immediately ingests the Amrita, and the sun and moon go, Mohini, help! And in that moment, Mohini uses her Sudarshan chakra, or the divine wheel-like serrated weapon, to instantly cut off Svarbanu's head. However, the Amrita, the elixir of immortality, had already touched his tongue and made its way down his throat. And as his neck got cut off, the Amrita dripped to go into the body. So even as Mohini then threw the head and the body of Svarbanu to both sides of the sky, they remained alive, kind of like Chiron. This is just my the first time I've made this connection, but Chiron kind of also has this moment where he should be killed, but like his immortality keeps him alive. And that's Svarbanu becomes the north node, with the head being called Rahu, and his body becomes the south node, or Ketu. So again, we have the sun god Surya and the moon, Chandra, battling against kind of a serpentine deity with Svarbanu, and gaining immortality themselves in the process of his defeat. So another beautiful myth. There are many of these across cultures that I think all can give us their own insights into eclipses in general, and surely to the upcoming one. Oh, this chart is my boyfriend and my anniversary chart. We met on April 8th, 2015. So the eclipse just happens to be our 9th anniversary. So that is part of the reason why we're here in Niagara Falls, is because it's more than just the opportunity to see the eclipse, but a celebration of our time together. You can see in the chart of the day we met that we had Leo rising in that moment with the sun there at almost 19 degrees Aries, with Mercury and Uranus, but then the south node. So this is a very interesting thing about 9 years, is that is half the time it takes for the nodes to go around the sky. So they get all the way around, or we have a nodal return every 18 years. And at this point, the configuration of the eclipses that will take place are so similar that even 5,000 years ago, the Babylonians were categorizing eclipses into various families called Saros series. So we have 19 different families spanning that 18 years with a little bit of overlap, with either happening with the north node or 6 months later into the year at the south node. And in my just last moment of my talk with you, thank you so much for staying and participating. We'll get to questions right after, but I'm just going to read what Bernadette Brady has to say about this current Saros series for today's chart. Let me go back to it. For Monday's chart in her book, The Eagle and the Lark, Predictive Astrology. So at the back, we get a list of dates. So here, April 8th, 2024 at 19 Aries, we see the Saros series as 8 north. So I'm going to read you her delineation of the Saros family, 8 north. The Saros series began in 1501 and will end in 2745. So while individual members of a Saros series occur every 18 years, the family itself will last for 1,200 years. So these are very long-term kind of configurations and patterns that take place for us on our planet. She says of this family, inventiveness and flashes of genius are the hallmark of this Saros series. The individual will have intuitive leaps, insights, good ideas, visions, or vivid dreams. This newfound inspiration will pull the person away from his or her social life or relationship, thereby causing strain in the private life. This is a time when the person needs to be free, if only for a few weeks. What a beautiful description for a person who is open to that kind of divine channeling of kind of occulted information. I actually happen to know someone who was born within this family 2 times ago. So she is 36. Her name is Queen Machete, or Joali Nicole. She is absolutely, I can say this with my full chest, one of the best cartomancers and tarot oracle readers that lives. And she actually was born with Leo rising and Sun in Aries under this same Saros cycle. So I hope that this will be a time when all of us can feel upgraded in our capacity to interact with the divine. I know that there's been a lot of kind of fear-mongering. It might be strong, but might be accurate in terms of the way that this eclipse has been discussed in a lot of public forums. And I hope that we can find ways to look at it with a little bit more nuance, really bring some ancient wisdom into what might happen. And I hope take away maybe something from my story as Hercules, the philosophy that some things within the courses of fate might feel painful in the moment in which they exist, in which they occur, but in the way things unfold can have a much greater positive effect than what we feel in the moment. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. I'm going to stop my share screen, and thank you, Lori and Mary, for helping me, and hopefully we have some great questions.
Yeah, thank you. I hope you can see all the hearts coming up. So
Many hearts. Oh, thank you guys.
yeah, throughout the presentation, you had a lot of emojis coming up. The first question that I'm going to ask you is related to your chart, just because you shared. There was a question as to what is the placement of your Chiron?
Oh, good question. Yes. My like default is not to have Chiron showing, so I apologize for that. Chiron for me is at 2 Virgo, which in whole sign is my 12th house.
Okay, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Now, more technical question. What type of orb or what orb do you use for eclipses?
Oh, so the astronomy answer is that you want to have the sun come into 15 degrees, so a decan and a half. At that point, it will be eclipse season, from the 15 degrees to the node and the 15 degrees after. And it will be in that window where you then want to have the moon come into perfect conjunction or perfect opposition. That'll be the real eclipses. The farther that the sun is away from the nodes at that point can change it into a partial solar or lunar eclipse. So you'll really want to see like within a 5-degree orb to like really be able to say conclusively like, oh, that's a total solar eclipse or a total lunar eclipse. So that's kind of like the sciencey mechanic behind it. In terms of like when it would be relevant in a natal chart, it's like, the closer or the smaller the orb, the more potent. I think during the whole month in which, or especially the 2 weeks between the lunar and solar eclipse, like to me, those are always kind of eclipse babies, especially when it's like towards the beginning and through like secondary progressions, you can watch that eclipse occur. So I think that's a good gauge of like, even like pinpointing exactly when the eclipse in a natal chart will like manifest is like, if it's kind of far, looking to see when it takes place in that secondary progression.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you. Okay, the next question. This is about Astrodienst. That's the program that you were using. And Jean would like to know how you figured out how to get the exact time for your location. It's more of a technical question for Astrodienst.
Yes. So actually, my favorite is to use the current transit calculator on AstroSeek.
Mm.
It's really, really flexible because you can just put in your city or your zip code, and then you can kind of surf through space-time, toggle through things and like get to like a configuration that you want. And then like if I want to save that moment, then I like to take it over and store it in my AstroBank. So I'm sure a lot of you will have like software that will like do all that at the same time for you. But
Yeah,
that's my method.
yeah. If you don't own software, I think I like astro-seek.com a lot as well. So if you have never been there, it's astro and then a dash seek, SEEK.com.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of options.
The current transit.
And it's free. They have a lot of different things that you can bring up. Okay, next question. Do you have any book recommendations on planetary yogas?
Ooh, so The person who I follow for Vedic, his name is Vic Dekara. He actually has many excellent books. And he does a series on YouTube where he translates a book called, it's either called Paul Deepika or that's the author's name, but the series on YouTube is Paul Deepika, and it is a Vedic handbook. I think that was written in like the 1300s in Sanskrit, and he translates the Sanskrit himself, so he's able to like really get it from the source material, and then like within his translation of the text, like just a small bit of it that he translates will have a whole YouTube video where he really like goes into explaining how the context and like how each of the techniques might work and like with practice charts and stuff. So that's just all on YouTube, but I know on his website he has all of his books, which include like translations or original works for sale.
Okay, and how do you spell his name, just so we can pop it in the chat box?
It's Vic, V-I-C, Dikara, D-I-C-A-R-A.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, of course, I love Vic.
Okay, the next question is about using the Vedic Raha yoga. And then it has to be with the sidereal or the sidereal zodiac, right? You wouldn't use that in conjunction with the tropical, or would you?
So the technique that we were using is called a Raj yoga, R-A-J. And Raj is the word for king or like royalty, or I think it's actually something that's very bright, Raj. But again, I'm a student of Vic Dekara, and Vic uses the 12 tropical signs and the 27 sidereal mansions or nakshatras together. This is also my practice. I also use the 12 tropical signs and the 27 lunar mansions in conjunction with one another. I came into that independently, but since Vic also uses that, that's one of the reasons why I really resonated with him. So in my case, I do use like the rulers of the tropical signs as the depositors for those houses when I calculate Raj yogas, if that makes sense. It's so funny because it sounds like gibberish, but hopefully with the audience, like
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Question from me.
Yeah.
When you're teaching astronomy, do
Yes.
you bring that into the course?
So I have not taught an astronomy class yet. Hopefully it will be like a full course will take place sometime in the near future. But I do run an astronomy group on Facebook called Astronomy for Astrologers. If you would like to join, love to have any of you. And it is a little bit more of like the sciencey rationales behind things, behind the things that we are using in astrology. And it seems on its face like sidereal is more astronomical in terms of like when you look out at the night sky, you can see that the Mars Saturn conjunction is happening in the stars we call Aquarius, right? But the tropical zodiac is also astronomical in that it just projects the like declinations or the latitudes of the Earth out into space. And that is that is a fully rational way of plotting celestial coordinates. Like when the sun reaches the Tropic of Cancer, even though it's not in the Cancer constellation, it rises through Stonehenge and it will always do so. That is astronomy, even though it's a different viewpoint than sidereal. So once you understand the astronomy of both zodiacs, I think that it is rational to put a tropical zodiac into a division of 12, while it's more rational to put a division of the sidereal chaotic stellar sky into a division of 27, where you can look at each bit of space a little bit more with a little more nuance. And that is the distance that the moon travels, which you never see a star with the sun. You only see stars with the moon. So I think there's a lot of reasons why you would, but there's a lot of reasons why that is the way that I choose to kind of combine those two astronomical visions of the sky.
Thank you for that. Very interesting. And Mary put the link to your Facebook group in the
Thank you
chat
so
box.
much, Mary.
Yeah. So if you love this type of conversation, please join Brandon's private Facebook group. And we are hoping to have Brandon teach some astronomy for KeplerCollege down the road. So you can stay tuned for that. Okay. This question is about the map that you showed. I'm thinking it was a map of the Venus, the trying to remember what you called it. Was it occultation? Yeah. The question is the eclipse only visible from here on the map that you showed, or was it just where it is visible in the US? But I'm thinking the map that you showed was not the eclipse map.
So there's a little bit of a difference. I didn't show a map of like totality. There's a lot of them out on the internet. You can see exactly where totality is and like where the partial eclipses, what they will all look like over the United States. I just specifically highlighted that Venus occultation because it's less known about, and with it, let me see if I can just like pull it back up really quick. If it will load, please. Thank you. So this is the map of where you can see the lunar occultation. It is in this dark part that is over to the right. Like I said, because the sun and then the moon and Venus are so close to each other, they're only 15 degrees away. So like you will just barely see them within the dawn, and then it will be daylight. But then for some of us, like it will be in that perfect window before the sun comes up, the closer that you are to that line. And then for others of us, you will be able to see it during the day if you're paying very, very close attention and kind of can track them up into the daytime sky. And it just happens to be, it literally is just so coincidental that this line almost happens to be the same line as the eclipse, which goes from Texas up through Canada in a similar kind of a trajectory. So that just, and just the morning before. So very, very cool.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
The next question is, can you explain the degree differences in the path of totality? I think you already covered this earlier.
Yes, it kind of has to do with the aspect that the moon makes with Lilith determines how large the moon appears. Because Lilith is the point when the moon is furthest, so when the moon is with Lilith, it is at its farthest away and appears the smallest. So when it is kind of like closer to us than average, then it will cover the sun totally. This is another part of my talk that I didn't have time to get into, but it is a very fascinating coincidence that at our current moment in history, the sun and moon happen to be proportionally the same distance compared to size to one another in the sky, making them appear almost exactly half a degree in width. That's just like completely coincidental. But so when the moon is slightly closer, it will cover the sun totally. And when it is slightly further, it will only cover the sun in an annulus or ring. So then you'll see two concentric circles. But so It's just in like the way that how large that the moon appears, and then like how the light from that this is being blocked by it can like get around it, that makes for how parts of the path of totality kind of experience those different durations and like slight deviations in terms of like whether the moon like kind of cuts straight across the sun or whether it like kind of like curves. So like for some people, they'll get totality, but the moon will curve out. So it'll be shorter than for some people who it just goes like straight across it. But so there's a lot of very nuanced mathematical science that goes into that I honestly couldn't even tell you if we had a very long time. But that's my
Yeah.
best effort.
Yeah. And let's see, this is a longer question. Is totality the same as they are all on the path? So I think the question is, wherever you are along that totality path, do you all see the same thing, or are you seeing something slightly different?
Yes. No, it is like kind of the configurations of the moment are universal. So everyone is experiencing that same exact picture at the time. However, when it first takes place down in Mexico, the rising for there will kind of be at 1 degree, 1 part. And then as it moves up and over, it will go east, which is like kind of backwards in time. So the people on the eastern part in Canada will have a much different ascendant, because it's not like kind of going forward with time in like an even way. It is kind of going backwards in a sense. But so the way that it will be different upon points in that line of totality is the ascendant, which will just place that picture in a different orientation in the sky above you. So I believe in Mexico, it will be more overhead, more like towards noon, where towards Canada, it will be a little bit farther west in the afternoon. But that's the only change, is just the orientation and the ascendant.
Got it. Thank you. I'm so glad someone asked this question. It's a question about your Oculus. Tell us about when they will be available, if they're available now, and where people go to find out.
Thank you. Yes, the Annulus is a project, and as a group, they're called the Onuli. But so one singular board is an Annulus, and I've been working on them for the last 4 years. The project just had a critical development because I was able to formally apply for patent protection within the United States. That is its own like whole long process that I'm very happy is over. And upon being granted, which can take another year or two before somebody in the government looks at my file and takes all this astrology gibberish and tries to make sense of it, and goes back and forth with me on that. At that time, then I will have around 17 more years of protection over the idea. So part of the reason why I went this route in terms of trying to secure intellectual property around the project was to give myself the time to explore how the Annulus will eventually come onto the market, and like take it towards manufacture and becoming a business. That all is not at all my area of expertise and is very daunting of an endeavor. I very much consider myself an artist and an occultist. I am not a capitalist. So someday getting to the point where The board is available for sale where you could buy one today and get it in the mail sent to you. That is a dream I hold deep in my heart that will be possible. And I don't know exactly when it will occur, but you can follow me on my social media and such for updates as that would happen down the timeline. So if you want to share those, it's Annular Astro on Facebook. On Facebook as well is my Facebook group, Astronomy for Astrologers. And on Instagram, my Instagram is Brandon's Up in the Sky Again. And it has both the portraits of the annuli as well as my aerial, my circus work. So
Great.
yes,
So
thank you.
stay tuned.
Stay tuned,
Yeah, hopefully you'll get those to market soon because it sounds like people want them. Okay, next question. For the new moon, do you have any recommendations for manifestation, new moon intentions?
For this particular eclipse?
Mhm.
So the kind of like generalized advice is to like pray. You know, pray to be delivered. A lot of people also choose to fast, you know, try not to, they're more trying to like kind of like keep the eclipse energy at bay because again, it is quite scary for the thing that gives light and life to the earth to kind of be covered up. You know, it's in a very general sense that is kind of a scary ordeal. Again, like you can talk about how many different solar deities kind of have to paddle with these serpents. That is not like a fun, exciting, like let's go for a new venture kind of a election. And with this one in particular too, the way that the brand new moon will immediately come into conjunction with Mercury retrograde. That also makes it seem like if you were to like start something at the eclipse, that it would either be in haste, so you have to restart again, or like some kind of like there'd be some kind of like misconnection where it doesn't actually last, right? So I do think that it probably is rational to just like take the moment for what it is and not necessarily pursue kind of magical endeavors. However, when asked this question by someone else, I was looking into other charts, and in 2 days afterward, I think on the 10th, when the moon, the now new waxing crescent moon, comes into conjunction with Jupiter, on I think that I had Cancer rising. So then the moon was also in the 11th house with Jupiter, which is a house of expansion, in Taurus, which is very fertile, with Jupiter and Uranus, you know, Uranus kind of like bringing in some of maybe that chaos that the eclipses can be known for, but still like it seemed like a more a configuration that was a little bit more conducive to something that's started then growing. So if you want, if that was more of your intention of like beginning something, then I might look for a different election than probably like the eclipse itself. Some people would say again to like stay inside and like shut your curtains and like don't let the rays befall you, and the gods might protect us anyway because it looks like a lot of us are going to have cloudy skies regardless. But personally, I think that total solar eclipses, well, and annular solar eclipses are some of the most awe-inspiring celestial events that could possibly take place. And I think as a human being alive during the time when this takes place, like I wouldn't miss it for all the world, no matter what the the metaphysical implications. Um, but that's just my own personal take on it.
Yeah. Okay. We have a couple people asking you to repeat the name of the tarot reader that you mentioned earlier.
Oh, her name is Joali, Joaly, Nicole. Her social media is Queen Machete, I think, on Facebook and Instagram, and she lives in Puerto Rico. She is wonderful. Yes, highly recommend if you need a cartomancer. She's incredible. I am a little bit biased because she is one of the first people who is a tester of the annulus. So she is lucky enough to already have one in her possession. So we've traded over the years, but in terms of tarot, there's nobody better. So yes, thanks for bringing her up again. I love Joali.
Yeah, thank you. So, well, this is going to be the last question. I know that we never can get to all of the questions, but we try to do as many as we can. So the last one is is there a difference if you're at a different elevation or if you're in totality, but there's no visibility? Like, do those things factor into the potency of the energetics of the eclipse?
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. The um hmm. I don't really know of like a lot of astrology where the like how high you are
Mhm.
like is really taken into account. The one thing that like comes to mind in terms of like to talk on is that astrology in the way that we get it calculated by default is um, like geocentric in terms of everything is mapped out from the core of the earth. So
Mm.
that's how everything displayed is from the perspective of the very center of the earth being like the reference point. But because there is like a distance to the surface and then we're on the surface and like this point on the surface is different than this point on the surface, the actual visual location of things can differ. And this actually can be displayed by using a topocentric display. So in like on AstroDienst or I'm sure other software, if you look at topocentric, that will actually show you the visual uh, kind of shift based on the actual place on the earth that you're putting in the software. And that is most critical for the moon. It's mostly the moon that will actually like shift in like exactly where it is in the sky from location to location. Everything else is basically far enough away where geo to topocentric doesn't actually have that much of an effect. It mostly has to do with the moon. And of course, with solar eclipses, we're talking about visually looking at the moon. So you actually do want to, if you're like really thinking about it from a stargazing and like what you're actually going to see perspective, you do actually want to use the topocentric calculation.
Okay. Is that parallax or is that
I,
different?
I think parallax is the word for how far the moon moves or how far something moves in that case. So like if somebody in Australia is looking at it versus somebody in Hawaii, like the difference will be the parallax. But then the way that it will be displayed is the topocentric like display option.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was very enlightening. I very much appreciate you joining us today. Love the mythology and the outfit and
Toga.
the toga.
Yes, I had ordered a lion headdress, so like for my Hercules um pretending to be acting as Hercules. I was supposed to have a lion headdress on, but through very, very predictable Mercury retrograde circumstances, it is not here. But I appreciate yes, being able to share my poem with you. That poem at the beginning was an original that I wrote for this specific presentation, just in light of the fascinating Chiron aspects that were coming up. So I appreciate being able to share that with you, as well as all these other wonderful kinds of insights to be gleaned from such a beautiful astronomical event.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we're going to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Brandon, for your presentation. Thank you, Mary, for helping out and putting links in the chat box. We will be live on Monday. We don't know if we'll be able to see the eclipse. There may be clouds, but we're certainly going to try. So if you want to join us, hop on YouTube. We'll be live streaming, and we'll be back again next week with another webinar. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, guys.